The Palace of Lethrian looked less like a building and more like a mountain made of glass that had decided very confidently to become architecture. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood beneath its vast dome and tried not to stare upward too much, because every time he did, he felt the same uncomfortable thought crawl into his mind. If that ceiling ever decided to fall, there was absolutely nowhere to run. Light drifted through the crystalline structure in soft violet waves, reflecting across the polished floor like slow-moving water. Tall alien figures stood in silent rows along the chamber, their elegant robes glowing faintly with threads of bioluminescent fiber. At first glance, they looked almost human. Calm faces, graceful posture, measured movements. But their long, slightly curved ears extended past their hair, giving them an otherworldly elegance that reminded Cole he was very far from Earth. He adjusted the collar of his diplomatic uniform and quietly wondered if it was too late to pretend he had left something important on his spaceship. A tall Lethrian official stepped forward. His voice was smooth and melodic, as if every sentence had been rehearsed for a concert hall. "Ambassador Cole of Earth," he said, bowing slightly, "today we celebrate the historic unity between our peoples." Cole nodded politely. This part, at least, he had expected. Speeches, ceremonies, possibly an awkward dinner where someone tried to serve him glowing vegetables that might or might not be alive. What he had not expected was the next sentence. "To finalize the alliance," the official continued calmly, "you will now select a spouse from the royal family." Cole blinked. Once. Twice. He leaned slightly toward the translator device clipped to his collar and tapped it. Um, quick question," he whispered. "Did he just say spouse?" The translator beeped cheerfully. "Yes," it replied. Cole straightened slowly. Around him, the chamber remained perfectly calm. Dozens of royal advisors stood watching him with patient interest. A line of elegant princesses stood along the upper balcony, each poised with the serene confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment their entire life. Apparently, everyone here believed this was a completely normal diplomatic procedure. Cole cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, "but I don't recall the marriage portion of the treaty." The High Chancellor stepped forward with the gentle smile of someone explaining gravity to a confused child. "It is a traditional symbolic union," the Chancellor said, "a gesture of trust, entirely ceremonial." "Ceremonial," Cole repeated. "Yes." "So, symbolic." "Correct. And no one actually expects me to suddenly become royalty on another planet." The Chancellor paused for a moment. "That depends on how enthusiastic you are." Cole stared at him. Somewhere behind him, he thought he heard one of the human aides choke back laughter. The Chancellor raised one elegant hand toward the balcony. "12 princesses stand before you," he said, "each noble, wise, and fully prepared to strengthen the alliance between our civilizations." Cole glanced upward. The princesses were indeed impressive. Each wore intricate royal attire that shimmered softly in the palace light. Their long ears gave them an ethereal appearance, almost like figures from some ancient myth. They also looked extremely composed. Cole, meanwhile, felt like someone had just handed him a live grenade and said, "Don't worry, it's mostly decorative." A glowing platform rose slowly from the floor beside him. "This is the selection pedestal," the Chancellor explained. Of course it was. "You will now observe the candidates while the ceremonial guide is presented." Cole nodded politely. 3 hours later, he deeply regretted that decision. The ceremony involved holographic genealogies, symbolic gestures with glowing spheres, something called the Seven Bows of Mutual Respect, and a brief lecture about cosmic harmony delivered by a priest who appeared to be at least 3 centuries old. By the end of it, Cole's brain felt like melted circuitry. The Chancellor gestured toward the balcony. "You may now choose." Cole inhaled slowly. 12 princesses stood in a perfect line, all of them calm, all of them dignified, all of them watching him with patient curiosity. Except one. Near the far end of the balcony, leaning casually against a tall crystal pillar, stood a princess who looked completely unimpressed with the entire event. Her long silver blue hair fell loosely around her shoulders. Her posture was relaxed, almost lazy, and her arms were crossed as she watched the ceremony with the faintest hint of amusement. Unlike the others, she looked less like someone waiting for a political alliance and more like someone waiting for the show to finally become interesting. Their eyes met for a moment. She smirked. Cole had no idea why, but something about that expression made him feel like she was the only honest person in the entire palace. Unfortunately, his exhausted brain decided that was the perfect moment to act. He raised his hand and pointed. Silence exploded across the chamber. The chancellor froze. The royal advisors froze. Even the glowing lights along the walls seemed to dim slightly, as if the palace itself had just realized something terrible had happened. Cole blinked. Did I pick wrong? The chancellor's expression slowly shifted into the quiet panic of a man watching centuries of diplomatic planning collapse in real time. Ambassador, he said carefully. Yes? You have selected Princess Thera. Cole looked back toward the balcony. The smirking princess pushed herself away from the pillar. Her eyes gleamed with sudden interest. Oh, she said loudly, her voice echoing through the chamber. This is going to be fun. For a long moment, no one in the vast crystal chamber moved. Ambassador Daniel Cole slowly lowered his arm, which suddenly felt like it had committed a crime against interstellar diplomacy. The silence stretched so long that he briefly wondered if the palace atmosphere had frozen solid. Then the whispers began. They started quietly at first, like distant wind moving through tall grass. Advisors leaned toward one another. Royal attendants exchanged nervous glances. Somewhere near the back of the hall, a Lethrian scholar dropped a glowing tablet that bounced across the floor with several very loud clinks. Cole cleared his throat. Okay, he said cautiously. I'm sensing a little tension. The High Chancellor looked like a man who had just watched a meteor heading directly toward his house. Ambassador Cole, he said slowly, each word carefully balanced. May I confirm that your selection was intentional? Cole blinked. Well, he said, I did point with purpose. The Chancellor inhaled. Several advisors behind him began whispering again, though whispering was generous. It sounded more like quiet panic disguised as polite conversation. Cole glanced up toward the balcony. Princess Thera was still standing where she had been, but now she looked much more awake. The amused smile on her face had grown wider, like someone who had just discovered a new and extremely entertaining problem. She pushed herself away from the crystal pillar and walked toward the edge of the balcony. Her movements were relaxed, confident, completely unconcerned with the diplomatic earthquake happening below. Well, she said, loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. That's new. Her voice carried easily through the massive hall. Ambassadors usually pretend not to see me. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter passed through the audience. Cole rubbed the back of his neck. That sounds slightly insulting. Oh, it is, Thera replied cheerfully. The High Chancellor turned toward her with visible distress. Princess Thera, he said carefully, this is a formal diplomatic ceremony. Yes, she said, and you have been selected. Yes, and according to tradition, the selection is binding. Thera tilted her head slightly, considering that. Her long ears shifted subtly with the movement, catching the violet light that flowed through the palace ceiling. Then she smiled again. Excellent. The Chancellor looked like someone who had just swallowed a small star. Meanwhile, Cole's diplomatic training finally kicked in, though unfortunately it arrived about 10 minutes too late. He stepped forward slightly. I just want to clarify something, he said. Is there any chance the pointing gesture was symbolic? The Chancellor closed his eyes briefly. Behind him, an advisor whispered something into his ear. The Chancellor's expression somehow became even worse. No, he said. Right. Not symbolic. Good to know. Another advisor stepped forward nervously. She carried a long tablet displaying ancient Lethrian script glowing in pale blue light. According to the Treaty of Unified Harmony, she said quickly, the chosen royal must accept the ambassador's gesture in full accordance with ceremonial law. Cole nodded slowly. That sounded extremely official and extremely permanent. So, he said carefully, hypothetically speaking, if someone accidentally pointed, you did not accidentally point, the Chancellor interrupted gently. Cole thought about that. That's fair. Above them, Thera leaned casually against the balcony railing. She looked down at Cole like a scientist observing an unusually interesting experiment. "You seem confused," she called down. Cole looked up. "That's because I am confused," Thera laughed. It was not the polite laughter of a royal princess during a ceremony. It was the open, genuine laughter of someone who found the entire situation deeply entertaining. "You should have seen your face when they started explaining the seven bows," she said. Cole squinted. "You were watching me?" "Of course," she replied. "You bowed in the wrong direction twice." "I was improvising." "You bowed toward a statue. It looked important." Several nearby advisors quietly covered their faces. The chancellor lifted one trembling hand. "Princess Thera," he said, "perhaps you would join us below." Thera considered that for a moment. Then she hopped lightly over the balcony rail. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Cole watched in alarm as she dropped nearly 4 meters toward the polished crystal floor. At the last moment, a soft burst of blue energy flared beneath her boots, slowing her descent. She landed effortlessly. Cole stared. "You could have used the stairs." Thera shrugged. "Where's the fun in that?" Up close, Cole could see her more clearly. She looked almost human, though the long, elegant ears and the faint silver patterns in her eyes marked her as unmistakably alien. Her expression was sharp, curious, and far too amused for someone who had just been unexpectedly engaged. She studied him for a long moment. "So," she said, "you're the human." "That's me. The one who accidentally chose the most problematic princess in the royal family." Cole hesitated. "Problematic how?" The chancellor groaned softly behind him. Thera's smile widened. "Oh," she said, "you're going to find out." The council chamber slowly began to recover from the shock, though the atmosphere now carried the subtle tension of a machine that had just been assembled incorrectly, and everyone was pretending not to notice. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood in the center of the glowing hall, while Princess Thera circled him slowly, studying him with the open curiosity of someone examining a strange new species. To be fair, Cole supposed that was exactly what he was. Thera tilted her head slightly. "You're shorter than I expected." Cole folded his arms. "That's the first thing you say to the man who just accidentally proposed to you?" "You didn't propose," she said calmly. "You pointed." "That feels like a technicality." Thera shrugged. "It is." Behind them, the High Chancellor was quietly speaking with several advisors who now looked as though they were trying to calculate the diplomatic consequences of gravity suddenly reversing. Cole leaned slightly closer to Thera. "Just so we're clear," he said quietly, "everyone seems very worried about you." "Yes. That doesn't concern you?" "Not particularly." She looked around the enormous chamber. "Most of them worry professionally." Cole raised an eyebrow. "That's a job?" "Very prestigious," she said. "Extremely boring." The chancellor finally approached them again, with the careful posture of a man attempting to cross a room filled with invisible lasers. "Ambassador Cole," he said, "tradition now requires that you and Princess Thera spend time together in preparation for the ceremonial union." Cole blinked. "Time together?" "Yes." "How much time?" The chancellor hesitated. "Enough." "That is not a comforting answer." Thera brightened suddenly. "Oh, good," she said. "I have plans." Cole looked at her cautiously. "That sentence makes me nervous." "Excellent." The chancellor cleared his throat. "The ambassador will be given access to the palace guest wing and the royal transport network. Princess Thera will act as his cultural guide." Several advisors made sounds that suggested they strongly disagreed with this arrangement, but were too afraid of ancient law to say so out loud. Cole glanced at Thera. "So, cultural guide." "Yes. What exactly does that involve?" Thera's smile grew wider. "Exploration. That word rarely means something safe." She turned and began walking toward the enormous doors at the far end of the chamber. Cole looked back at the chancellor. "Is it too late to request a different cultural guide?" The chancellor sighed deeply. "I'm afraid tradition has spoken." "Tradition," Cole muttered, "has a very strange sense of humor." Thera glanced over her shoulder. "Are you coming, Ambassador?" Cole followed her across the polished crystal floor. "Where exactly are we going?" "Outside." "That seems vague." "Relax," she said. "You'll enjoy it." "I've heard that before." The massive doors of the palace opened with a soft hum. Beyond them stretched the city of Lethrion. Cole stopped walking. The capital spread across a vast plateau beneath a sky filled with drifting silver clouds. Towering structures of glass and living crystal rose in elegant spirals. Streams of hovering vehicles moved silently between platforms suspended in the air. Floating gardens drifted slowly between buildings, like green islands. And in the distance, beyond the city's edge, enormous mountain ranges glowed faintly with blue energy fields that crawled along their peaks like lightning trapped beneath stone. Cole exhaled slowly. Okay, he admitted. That's impressive. Thera stepped beside him. You haven't seen the interesting parts yet. Cole glanced sideways. That sentence again. She walked toward a sleek, hovering craft parked near the palace entrance. The vehicle looked like a narrow wing made of dark metal and glowing blue lines. Thera jumped into the pilot seat. Cole stared at it. That doesn't look very safe. It flies. That was not my concern. She tapped a control panel. The craft hummed softly as the engine awakened. You're the ambassador of an interstellar civilization, she said. Surely you're not afraid of a small exploration ship. Cole climbed in beside her. I'm not afraid. He paused. I'm cautiously terrified. Thera laughed. The craft lifted smoothly into the air and shot forward between the palace towers. Cole gripped the seat. You know, he said calmly, most diplomatic tours involve museums. Museums are boring. You're flying extremely fast. This isn't fast. Then I don't want to see fast. The city blurred beneath them as the craft raced toward the distant mountains. Thera guided the ship through narrow passages between floating structures with the confidence of someone who had done this far too many times. Cole watched the terrain rushing past them. So, he said carefully, hypothetically speaking, what makes you the problematic princess? Thera didn't answer immediately. The craft soared out of the city and into open sky. Below them stretched vast wild lands, forests glowing with alien bioluminescence, rivers that shimmered like liquid starlight, and enormous ruins rising from the ground like the bones of ancient machines. Finally, she spoke. Because I go places the council doesn't like. Cole frowned. Why not? She pointed ahead. In the distance, massive metallic structures protruded from the mountainside, ancient, half-buried shapes humming faintly with energy. Because, she said quietly, those things are older than our civilization. Cole leaned forward slightly. What are they? Thera smiled again. That, she said, is exactly what I've been trying to find out. The craft accelerated toward the glowing ruins. Cole leaned back in his seat. You know, he said, most people would have led with the giant, mysterious alien machines. Thera laughed as the ship dove toward the mountains. Where's the fun in that? The exploration craft glided between the jagged peaks of the mountain range, while the sky slowly shifted from pale silver to a deeper shade of violet. Ambassador Daniel Cole had stopped gripping the seat quite as tightly, though that did not mean he trusted the situation any more than before. Below them, enormous metallic shapes rose from the mountainside like the skeletons of forgotten titans. Cole leaned forward. You were not exaggerating. Thera guided the craft downward with practiced precision. The ship settled onto a wide stone platform that looked ancient enough to have been built before most stars in the sky had formed. The engines powered down. Silence filled the valley. Cole stepped out of the craft and immediately looked up. The structure towering above them was enormous. Dark metal surfaces curved upward into the mountain itself, covered in strange patterns that faintly glowed with pale blue energy. Okay, Cole said slowly. That is not a ruin. Thera walked toward the structure. No, she said. It's sleeping. Cole followed her. That sentence is not comforting. She ran her hand across the metallic surface. The glowing patterns reacted instantly, rippling outward like light moving across water. Cole stepped back. Oh, good, he said. It noticed us. Thera glanced over her shoulder. Relax. It does that. Does what? Wakes up a little. Cole stared at the structure. Princess, how often do you come here? Every few weeks. And the council knows? They know I explore the mountains. That sounds like a very creative version of the truth. Thera smiled. The council prefers not to ask questions it might not enjoy hearing the answers to. Cole walked slowly around the enormous structure. Several massive pillars extended from the mountain rock, each covered with the same glowing symbols. Some parts of the machine were buried deep beneath layers of stone, suggesting the structure had been there for thousands of years, maybe longer. Cole pulled a small scanner from his belt and activated it. The device immediately began beeping. Then it beeped louder. Then it made a long, confused noise and displayed several warning symbols. "That seems promising," Cole said. Thera leaned over his shoulder. "What does it say?" "It says the energy readings here are impossible." "That's helpful. The scanner thinks this machine is producing more power than the entire city of Lethrian." Thera looked pleased. "Yes." Cole slowly lowered the scanner. "And you didn't think that was worth mentioning earlier?" "I did," she said, "but you seemed busy surviving the flight." Cole nodded thoughtfully. "That's fair." They continued walking along the base of the enormous structure. After several minutes, Cole noticed something else. "You said this place is ancient." "Yes." "How ancient?" Thera shrugged slightly. "No one knows." "That's also not comforting." She stopped beside a tall metallic arch embedded into the mountainside. Cole examined it. The arch looked like a doorway, though it had no visible door, just smooth black metal and glowing lines running across its surface. "Have you been inside?" Cole asked. Thera nodded. "Once." "And?" Her expression changed slightly. "It woke up." Cole immediately took 2 steps backward. "Woke up how?" "The lights turned on. The walls started moving." Cole raised both hands. "Nope." "What?" "I have a strict personal rule about entering ancient alien machines that wake up." Thera looked amused. "You travel between star systems?" "Yes." "But a hallway scares you?" "Yes." "That seems inconsistent." Cole pointed toward the glowing arch. "That hallway could be older than humanity." "Exactly," she said. "That's the opposite of reassuring." Thera stepped closer to the arch. The glowing lines brightened slightly as she approached. Cole sighed. "You're going to activate it again, aren't you?" "Maybe. I would strongly prefer the no option." She reached out and placed her hand against the surface. The reaction was immediate. The glowing symbols surged with light. Deep within the mountain, something massive shifted. Cole slowly looked upward. "Oh," he said quietly, "that sounds expensive." A low hum filled the air. The arch began to separate down the middle as 2 curved sections of metal slid apart with ancient mechanical precision. Beyond it, a long corridor stretched deep into the mountain. Soft blue lights flickered to life along the walls. Thera looked delighted. "It still works." Cole stared at the glowing corridor. "I feel like I should call someone." "Who?" "Anyone who specializes in giant, mysterious alien machines turning on." Thera stepped into the doorway. Cole remained outside. "You're not coming?" she asked. He looked at the corridor, then at the enormous structure around them, then back at her. "Just so we're clear," he said, "if a robot army wakes up in there, I'm blaming you." Thera grinned. "That's fair." Cole took a deep breath and stepped through the arch. The moment he crossed the threshold, the lights along the corridor brightened. Far below the mountain, something enormous began to move. Cole froze. "Thera." "Yes?" "I think it woke up more than a little." The corridor lights flickered alive one by one, stretching deep into the mountain like a trail of glowing stars. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood just inside the ancient structure, staring down the passage while trying very hard not to imagine what kind of civilization had built something this enormous. Behind him, the metallic doorway sealed shut with a smooth, heavy sound. Cole slowly turned around. Did the door just close?" Princess Thera glanced over her shoulder. "Yes." "Was it supposed to do that?" "Probably." Cole folded his arms. "That word again." The floor beneath them vibrated softly, like a distant machine slowly stretching after a very long sleep. Thera looked down at the glowing panels beneath her boots. "Interesting." Cole looked at her. "That's not the reaction I was hoping for." She walked a few steps forward, studying the walls. The corridor was wide enough to drive a transport vehicle through, its smooth metallic surfaces covered in faint geometric lines that pulsed with soft blue light. Cole cautiously followed. So, he said, just to review our current situation. Thera nodded politely. We are inside an ancient alien machine. Yes. The machine has clearly just activated. Yes. And the exit sealed behind us. Thera tilted her head. That does seem inconvenient. Cole pointed toward the sealed doorway. Inconvenient is forgetting your keys. He gestured toward the glowing corridor. This is the opening scene of a disaster report. Thera laughed softly. You worry too much. That is literally my job. They continued deeper into the structure. As they walked, the lights ahead of them activated automatically, as if the machine were guiding them forward. Cole glanced at the walls. The glowing lines had begun forming shifting patterns, symbols that looked almost like a language. His translator device beeped several times, clearly struggling. That's new, he muttered. Thera leaned closer to one section of the wall. These symbols aren't Lethrian. Cole nodded. I figured that part out when my translator tried to apologize. She ran her fingers along the glowing surface. The symbols rearranged themselves instantly. Cole blinked. Oh, good, he said. It's interactive. Thera studied the shifting patterns with fascination. This machine isn't dead, she said quietly. Cole looked around the enormous corridor. Yes, I noticed that. It's responding to us. That also concerns me. Thera continued walking until they reached a massive circular chamber. The room was enormous, its ceiling disappearing high into the mountain above them. In the center stood a towering column of metal surrounded by floating rings of glowing energy. Cole stopped. Well? Thera stepped closer to the structure. The floating rings rotated slowly around the central column, humming with power. Cole checked his scanner again. The device instantly produced a series of loud warning beeps. That sound is not encouraging. Thera glanced at the screen. What does it say? It says we are standing next to something generating enough energy to power several planets. She smiled slightly. So the scanner is working again. Cole slowly lowered the device. You brought me to a machine capable of powering multiple planets. Yes. And this seemed like something to mention later? I prefer dramatic reveals. Cole rubbed his face. Of course you do. Suddenly, the floating rings accelerated. The humming sound deepened. Cole immediately stepped backward. Oh, that's definitely new. Thera frowned slightly. That didn't happen last time. That sentence has become my least favorite sentence. The central column began emitting pulses of blue light that spread across the chamber walls. The symbols covering the room started moving faster, rearranging themselves into larger patterns. Cole's translator device beeped loudly. Then it spoke. Identity unknown. Cole blinked. Did the wall just talk? Thera crossed her arms. Yes. The glowing rings slowed slightly. The voice spoke again. Civilization detected. Cole leaned toward the wall. Hello? The machine paused. Species classification unknown. Cole shrugged. That's fair. Thera stepped forward. We're explorers, she said. The machine responded instantly. Unauthorized activation detected. Cole looked at her. That sounds bad. Thera nodded thoughtfully. Yes. The central column emitted a deeper pulse. The floating rings expanded outward. Cole took another step back. Thera. Yes. I think we just turned on something very important. She studied the glowing machine carefully. Then she smiled. You did. Cole stared at her. I did. You walked through the doorway first. He pointed toward the column. So the ancient alien supermachine thinks I activated it. Apparently. Cole inhaled slowly. Somewhere deep within the mountain, enormous mechanisms began moving. The sound rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Cole looked at Thera. I want it clearly recorded that this was not my idea. Thera folded her arms. You chose the princess who explores forbidden alien ruins. Cole sighed. That was an accident. Another pulse of energy rippled through the chamber. Lights across the walls brightened. The machine spoke again. System reinitialization sequence beginning. Cole stared at the glowing column. That sounds extremely permanent. Thera grinned. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Cole looked up toward the massive ceiling far above them. Yes, he said quietly. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. The chamber vibrated again, this time with a deeper rhythm, like the steady heartbeat of something enormous waking after a long sleep. Blue light rippled across the walls and spiraled upward toward the towering column in the center of the room. Ambassador Daniel Cole slowly turned in a circle, watching panels of ancient machinery slide open along the walls. Thera, yes, I think we've reached the part of the adventure where things become officially dangerous. Princess Thera stood with her arms folded, studying the glowing column like a scholar who had just discovered a particularly exciting puzzle. Oh, it was dangerous before, she said calmly. Cole nodded. Good, just checking. The floating rings around the column accelerated again, rotating faster and faster until they blurred into bands of blue light. Streams of energy began flowing between them like liquid lightning. Cole lifted his scanner again. The device immediately began producing a noise that sounded suspiciously like panic. He looked at the display. Oh no! Thera glanced at him. What? It says the machine is linking to external systems. She frowned slightly. External systems? Cole gestured toward the walls. External systems that might be very big. As if answering him, the chamber lights flared brighter. Then the voice returned. Planetary network reconnecting. Cole froze. Planetary? Thera's eyes widened slightly. That's new. You said this thing powered cities. Yes, Cole pointed at the column. It just said planetary network. Thera leaned closer to the glowing rings. The energy streams flowing through the chamber grew stronger, forming complex geometric patterns in the air. She exhaled slowly. This machine isn't just a power system. Cole folded his arms. Let me guess. She looked up at the ceiling. It's part of something bigger. Cole sighed. Of course it is. Deep beneath them, something massive shifted again. The entire chamber trembled as distant mechanical structures began activating throughout the mountain. Cole looked upward nervously. I'm starting to suspect we just woke up the entire planet. Thera walked around the central column, examining the shifting energy fields. This technology is far older than our civilization. That sentence keeps coming back. She pointed toward the rotating rings. Look at the patterns. Cole leaned closer. Within the glowing bands of energy, holographic projections were forming, maps of the planet, complex orbital diagrams, and enormous networks of energy lines stretching across the surface of Lethrion. Cole stared. Okay? What? This machine is connected to hundreds of other structures. Thera smiled faintly. Yes. Cole looked at her. Why do you sound excited about that? Because it confirms something I suspected. And that is? She pointed at the planetary map. These ruins aren't ruins. Cole stared at the projection. They're infrastructure. Exactly. Cole slowly rubbed his face. So let me summarize. He pointed toward the glowing column. We accidentally activated an ancient planetary system. Thera nodded. Yes. And the system is reconnecting to every other ancient structure on the planet. Yes. And the Council has absolutely no idea this exists. Thera smiled. Also yes. Cole exhaled. Well, what? At least this explains why they didn't want you exploring the mountains. The machine's voice spoke again. Primary operator detected. Cole blinked. Thera. Yes? It just said operator. She tilted her head. Interesting. The glowing rings slowed slightly. A narrow beam of light scanned across Cole from head to toe. He stood perfectly still. I don't like being scanned. The machine paused. Then it spoke again. Operator identity confirmed. Cole pointed at himself. Wait. Thera raised an eyebrow. What? It thinks I'm the operator. She crossed her arms. Well, technically, you did activate it. I walked through a doorway. That counts. The holographic planetary map shifted. Energy lines across the surface of Lethrion began lighting up one by one. Far away in the distance, ancient towers hidden beneath mountains and forests started awakening. Cole stared at the projection. Oh, Thera leaned closer. What? I think the system is starting up everywhere. She looked delighted. Cole looked horrified. Princess. Yes? We may have just rebooted an entire alien planetary defense network. Thera grinned. That would explain the power levels. Cole pointed at the hologram. And the fact that those orbital structures just appeared. Above the map, massive shapes formed in orbit, enormous constructs slowly coming online. Thera folded her arms thoughtfully. Well, she said, that's going to surprise the council. Cole stared at the glowing projection. Yes, he sighed. Surprise is definitely one word for it. The machine spoke again. Operator directive required. Cole blinked. And Thera. Yes. I think the ancient alien supercomputer wants instructions. She looked at him. Well? Cole pointed at the glowing column. You're the one who likes exploring forbidden technology. Thera smiled. You activated it. Cole groaned. This is exactly how diplomatic incidents start. The glowing rings slowed until they hovered quietly around the central column, humming with the calm, steady rhythm of a machine waiting patiently for orders. The enormous chamber was now fully illuminated, its walls covered in shifting constellations of alien symbols that moved like living mathematics. Ambassador Daniel Cole stood with his hands on his hips, staring at the floating planetary map above the column. Across the projection, ancient structures scattered throughout Lethrion were now glowing with active energy. Thera stood beside him, watching the same map with unmistakable excitement. Well, she said softly. Cole nodded slowly. Yes. That escalated quickly. The machine's voice echoed calmly through the chamber. Operator directive required. Cole raised a finger. I'd like to officially state that calling me the operator still feels extremely incorrect. Thera folded her arms. You activated the system. I walked through a door. That counts. Cole sighed and looked up at the massive projection again. High above the planet, several enormous orbital structures now floated in perfect geometric positions. Each one glowed faintly as energy streamed between them, like invisible threads. Those are defense platforms, he said quietly. Thera nodded. Yes. And they've been asleep for thousands of years. Yes. Cole looked around the chamber. And somehow I woke them up. Yes. He pointed at the column. Just making sure we all understand the situation. Thera smiled slightly. I think the machine chose you. Cole laughed once. Machines shouldn't choose diplomats. The chamber vibrated softly again, but this time the sound felt stable, like a system reaching equilibrium rather than waking into confusion. The voice spoke again. Operator presence recognized. Planetary defense grid restored. Cole looked up. That's, actually good. Thera leaned closer to the projection. The energy network across Lethrion had stabilized. Every ancient structure was now active but calm, glowing faintly beneath forests, mountains, and oceans. For centuries, she said quietly, our world has been sitting on a defense system no one understood. Cole nodded. And now it's awake. She looked at him. And it answered to a human. Cole shrugged. That's going to make the council very uncomfortable. Thera laughed. That's my favorite outcome. A new projection appeared above the column. It showed the royal capital of Lethrion. Signals were already flooding toward the palace. Cole looked at it. I think the council just noticed. Thera grinned. They're probably panicking. Definitely panicking. Cole folded his arms and studied the glowing chamber again. Several hours ago, he had been a careful diplomat trying to avoid making a cultural mistake. Now he was apparently the recognized operator of an ancient planetary defense network built by a long-vanished civilization. He exhaled slowly. You know, he said, this is not in the ambassador training manual. Thera tilted her head. Are you regretting your choice? Cole thought about that. He looked at the ancient machines humming quietly around them. Then he looked at the princess standing beside him, calm, curious, and clearly far more comfortable in forbidden ruins than royal ceremonies. Finally, he smiled. No? Thera raised an eyebrow. No? Cole shook his head. I think I accidentally chose the only person on this planet who could have helped me survive this situation. She laughed softly. That's a generous interpretation of events. Cole looked up at the glowing map one more time. The ancient network was stable now, peaceful, protective. For the first time in thousands of years, the world of Lethrion was defended by the technology its creators had left behind. And somehow, by pure accident, he had helped wake it. The machine spoke again. Operator directive completed. System awaiting future instruction. Cole nodded politely toward the column. Great, Thera smiled. What now, Ambassador? Cole looked toward the sealed doorway behind them. I believe we return to the palace. And explain? Yes, Thera laughed again. That will be entertaining. Cole gestured toward the exit. And after that, yes? He smiled slightly. You mentioned forbidden territories earlier. Thera's eyes lit up instantly. Oh, yes. Cole sighed in quiet resignation. I have a feeling my diplomatic career is about to become much more adventurous. The door behind them slowly opened as the ancient machine powered down to a calm, steady glow. Together, they stepped back into the mountain corridor. Far above them, the sky of Lethrion shimmered as the restored defense platform settled into silent orbit. Cole glanced sideways at the princess walking beside him. You know, he said, when they told me to choose a spouse, I thought it was a formality. Thera smirked. And now? Cole looked out toward the glowing alien world beyond the mountain. Now I think it was the best mistake I've ever made.